A CEO was chained to a bomb with a timer counting down the final minutes of his life. His only hope was a janitor's 3-year-old child who wasn't supposed to be there. This is the true story of a banking executive named Marcus Thorne, forced to rob his own vault while a live explosive was locked around his chest. To understand how a child entered this nightmare, you must first see the two isolated worlds that were about to collide. One was a penthouse of silent terror. The other was a janitor's closet, where a little girl was about to wake from her nap. Marcus Thorne lived in a 47th floor penthouse where silence was measured in decimal points. Every morning at 6:15, his personal assistant delivered a briefing on world markets, geopolitical risks, and a discreet, encrypted report on potential physical threats to his person. He was 58 years old, the CEO of Meridian Trust, a bank that managed assets for clients who preferred their wealth to be invisible. His life was a series of controlled environments, armored vehicles, secured floors, biometric locks. He had not walked through a public door without a security detail in 7 years. The last time he felt truly safe was a memory he could no longer access. On the other side of the city, in a neighborhood where the streetlights flickered, Elena Mendez woke at 4:30. Her alarm was the sound of her 3-year-old daughter, Sofia, stirring in the bed beside her. The apartment was one room with a kitchenette, the walls thin enough to hear the neighbor's television. Elena was 34, and she had been cleaning the Meridian Trust building for 11 months. She worked the overnight shift, 11 p.m. to 7 a.m., because the pay was $2 more an hour and because she could bring Sofia, who would sleep on a folded blanket in the janitor's supply closet. The building's security chief, a man named Riggs, had looked the other way for a $50 cash bonus every Friday. It was an unspoken rule in the ecosystem of the building. Some rules existed to be quietly broken for the right price. Marcus's isolation was not accidental, it was architectural. After the kidnapping of a rival banking executive in London 2 years prior, his board had insisted on what the security consultants called a zero-touch perimeter. No unknown visitors, no unscreened packages. His penthouse had its own air filtration, its own water supply, a panic room behind a bookshelf. He had 3 ex-Special Forces personnel on rotation. Their job was to be ghosts. He saw them only as brief nods in the hallway. He communicated with them through an earpiece he wore during transitions. His world had become so secure that it had begun to feel like a different kind of prison. He ate meals prepared by a chef who left them in a thermal box outside his door. He exercised on a treadmill facing a screen showing a live feed of the Alps. He had not felt the actual wind on his face in over 400 days. Elena's world was held together by tape and quiet desperation. The night shift at Meridian Trust paid her $1,200 every 2 weeks after taxes. Her rent was $900. She owed $3,000 to a medical clinic for Sofia's asthma treatment. She was 2 months behind on the payment plan. Every night, she pushed her cleaning cart through the marble halls, wiping fingerprints from glass doors, vacuuming carpets so thick they swallowed sound. She saw the evidence of immense wealth, discarded financial journals with headlines about billion-dollar mergers, half-empty crystal glasses smelling of expensive scotch. But it existed in a dimension as remote to her as a television show. Her focus was the clock, the list of rooms, and the steady rhythm of her work that kept the panic about next month's rent at bay. The first crack in Marcus's fortress appeared on a Tuesday. His head of security, a former intelligence officer named Carver, presented him with a new threat assessment. "We're seeing chatter," Carver said, his voice flat through the speakerphone. "A group, possibly Eastern European, possibly freelance. Their pattern suggests they don't go for ransom through digital means. They prefer physical coercion, making the target complicit in the asset transfer. It's messy, it's personal." Marcus had dismissed it. "That's what I pay you for," he'd said. "To make it not my problem." Carver had paused. "Sir, with respect, no perimeter is perfect if the threat decides the payoff is worth exceptional risk." Marcus ended the call. He poured a drink and stood at his floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the city lights. The vulnerability Carver described felt abstract, a story about someone else. For Elena, the crack was a piece of paper slid under her door, a final notice from the clinic. Pay in full within 10 days or the account would be sent to collections. Collections meant court. Court meant a judgment. A judgment meant her wages could be garnished. That night, pushing her cart past the bank's executive suites on the 45th floor, she stopped outside the door marked M. Thorne, Chairman and CEO. She placed her hand against the cool wood. She didn't know the man inside. She knew his schedule from the cleaning roster. He left the building at 7:20 p.m. every evening. She knew he preferred his desk organized with precise military alignment. She knew he drank water from a glass bottle that she was instructed to wash by hand. In that moment, standing in the silent hallway, the gulf between her life and his felt like a physical, crushing weight. She took her hand away. She kept cleaning. The pressure on Marcus was financial, a slow leak in his professional empire. Meridian Trust was facing a regulatory audit. Several high-net-worth clients were getting nervous, asking for withdrawals. The board was scheduling urgent, closed-door meetings he wasn't invited to. His own attorney had used the word contingency in their last call. Marcus understood the language of power. He was being edged toward an exit. His value was being recalculated, and the number was dropping. This quiet corporate siege made him reckless. He began altering his routines against protocol. He told his evening detail he wanted to walk the last block to his car. He started having his driver stop at a specific newsstand just to feel the paper in his hands. He was asserting control in the only ways he had left, not realizing he was painting a target on his own back for anyone watching. Elena, meanwhile, was running out of time. The 10th day arrived. She called the clinic, her voice shaking. They would not budge. That night, Sophia had a coughing fit in the supply closet. Elena held her, feeling the tiny ribs rattle, counting the seconds between wheezes. She had no medicine left. She had no money for more. She did the only thing she could think of. She took Sophia in her arms and left her cart in the hallway. She rode the service elevator up to the 47th floor, to the executive medical suite. It was always unlocked, stocked for emergencies. She just needed an inhaler, just one. She would note it on the inventory, she would figure it out later. As she approached the door, she heard voices. Men's voices, sharp, speaking in low, urgent tones that were not part of the building's normal nighttime hum. She froze, pressing herself and Sophia into a shadowy alcove. The men were not security. They wore dark maintenance uniforms, but their movements were all wrong, too quick, too purposeful. One of them held a complex-looking device, a tangle of wires and blocks. They were bypassing the electronic lock to Marcus Thorne's private elevator, the one that went directly to the penthouse from the garage. Elena watched, her heart hammering against Sophia's back. She saw a face in the dim light, pale, scarred, utterly focused. She knew with a mother's primal certainty that this was wrong. This was the danger the security briefings whispered about. These men were here for the man in the penthouse, and she was here, hidden in the dark, with her child in her arms. She should have run. She should have taken Sophia and fled down the service stairs, called security from her phone in the alley, but her feet were rooted. The clinic's final notice was in her pocket. The men finished with the lock. The elevator door slid open with a soft chime. They entered. The door closed. The indicator light began to climb, 48, 49, 50, headed directly to the penthouse, to Marcus Thorne. And in that moment, the two separate worlds, the penthouse of silent terror and the janitor's closet of desperate love, were no longer parallel. They were on a collision course, connected by a single ascending elevator car. Elena stood in the dark, holding her sleeping daughter, knowing something terrible was happening, and knowing that her own desperate need had placed her right in its path. She had to choose, run for her own safety, or move toward the sound of the threat. She looked down at Sophia's peaceful face, and then she looked at the stairwell door leading up. Elena pushed open the stairwell door. The concrete steps echoed with a hollow sound that seemed to swallow her breath. She climbed one flight, then two, Sophia a warm, heavy weight in her arms, the stuffed rabbit dangling from her tiny fist. She wasn't thinking about being a hero. She was thinking about the men in the elevator, about the silent alarm she hadn't triggered, and about the fact that if something happened to the CEO, her job, the fragile thread holding her life together, would vanish. She reached the penthouse landing, a plain steel door marked PH Service Access. She leaned her ear against it. Silence. Then a voice, muffled but sharp, a command, "Sit, do not move." Her hand trembled on the handle. This was the point of no return. She took a breath, shifted Sophia higher on her hip, and turned the handle. The door opened a crack. The penthouse foyer was dark, lit only by the city's glow through the panoramic windows. She could see into the great room. Marcus Thorne was in his leather chair, but he wasn't sitting casually. His posture was rigid, his hands clenched on the armrests. Two men stood over him. The one with the scar was fitting a bulky black vest over Marcus's suit jacket. It was connected by thick wires to a small metal box with a digital display. The numbers glowed green in the dim light. 5948, 5947, a countdown. The second man was speaking into Marcus's ear. The vault code, the one that overrides the time lock, you have it. You will enter it at 9:15 a.m. precisely. You will withdraw the contents of safety deposit box number 717. You will bring them to the garage, to the black van. You do this, you live, you deviate, we press this. He held up a small black remote. The signal is local. It does not leave this floor. No jamming will stop it. Do you understand? Marcus gave a single stiff nod. His face was pale, a mask of controlled fury. He was a man who negotiated billion-dollar deals, and now he was being given instructions in his own home by men who smelled of cigarettes and violence. The code, the scarred man repeated. Say it. Marcus's voice was gravel. 7, Alpha 2, Niner, Foxtrot, 0. The man nodded, inputting it into a tablet. Good, now we wait. This was the plan Elena had interrupted, a forced inside job. They weren't here to kidnap him for ransom. They were using him as a key, turning him into a thief. The bomb was the leash. The remote was the whip, and they were going to sit in his penthouse for the next 9 hours until the bank opened. Elena started to pull the door closed, to retreat and call the police from a safe distance. But Sophia stirred, letting out a small, sleepy murmur. Mama. The sound was soft, but in the tomb-like quiet of the penthouse, it might as well have been a shout. The scarred man's head snapped toward the service door. What was that? Elena froze, her blood turning to ice. She backed into the stairwell shadow, but it was too late. The man was already moving, his hand going to his waist. In 3 strides, he was at the door, yanking it open. The harsh fluorescent light from the stairwell fell on Elena and Sophia. The man's eyes widened, then narrowed. He grabbed Elena by the arm and dragged her into the penthouse, kicking the door shut behind her. Who are you? The second man demanded, the one with the remote. Janitor, Elena gasped, clutching Sophia tight. I was checking a noise. I'm sorry, I'll go. I didn't see anything. The scarred man laughed, a dry, humorless sound. You see everything now. He looked at his partner. This is a problem. Marcus Thorne was staring at them, his eyes moving from the terrified woman in a cleaner's uniform to the small child hiding her face in her mother's neck. A child, in his penthouse. The absurdity of it cut through his fear for a second. Then the reality crashed down. They would not let witnesses leave. We can't have 2 more, the man with the remote said, his voice low. The plan is for one mover, 1 bomb. This is messy. Then we make it clean, the scarred man said. His meaning was clear. No, the word came from Marcus. It was quiet, but it stopped both men. He looked at Elena, saw the sheer animal terror in her eyes, saw the way she was trying to make her own body a shield for her daughter. He saw the final notice from the clinic, crumpled and visible in the pocket of her uniform. He saw a desperation he recognized, even if its shape was foreign. She stays. The child stays. They are non-factors. They remain here with me. You have your leverage. What does it matter if there are more people connected to the bomb? It only gives you more insurance. The 2 kidnappers exchanged a look. The logic was perverse but sound. More hostages meant more incentive for Marcus to comply. And killing a woman and child in cold blood was a different order of crime, one that left a forensic signature even they were wary of. The scarred man nodded slowly. Fine, they stay in that room. He pointed to a powder room off the foyer. You make a sound, you try to signal, he dies, and then you die. Understand? Elena nodded, unable to speak. She was pushed into the small marble bathroom. The door was closed. She heard the click of a lock. She slid down the wall to the floor, Sophia in her lap. The child was fully awake now, confused but not yet crying. Mama, dark. SHH my Amma, Elena whispered, her lips against Sophia's hair. We have to be very quiet, like a game. She held her daughter, listening to the muffled voices in the other room. The bomb had 57 minutes left on its countdown, but the timer, she realized, was a fake, a threat. The real trigger was the remote in the man's hand. They could detonate it at any time. They were all chained to it now. In the great room, the dynamic had shifted. The kidnappers, who had been all business, were now agitated by the unforeseen variable. They argued in low tones in a language Marcus didn't understand. He used the distraction. His eyes scanned the room. His phone was on the coffee table just 10 feet away. Useless. They would have taken it. The panic button was behind a panel in the bookshelf 6 feet to his left, impossible to reach without notice. His gaze fell on a small, framed photograph on a side table. Him and his sister, years ago, on a sailboat. He hadn't spoken to her in 3 years. A wave of profound loneliness washed over him, sharper than the fear of the bomb. This was how it would end. Isolated, in a room with criminals and strangers, over money that wasn't even his. Then from the bathroom he heard it, a small melodic sound. Sophia was singing, a whisper of a nursery rhyme, barely audible. Los Palitos Dyson, Pio, Pio, Pio. The tiny voice cut through the tension in the room like a laser. The kidnappers stopped arguing. The scarred man walked to the bathroom door and banged on it. Silence. The singing stopped, but the spell was broken. The human sound, the innocent sound, had reframed the room. These weren't just assets and obstacles. There was a child in there. Marcus found his voice again. "You need to let them use the bathroom," he said, his tone deliberately calm, administrative. "The child, it's a biological necessity, unless you want a bigger mess to clean up." The man with the remote scowled but nodded to his partner. The bathroom door was unlocked. Elena emerged, holding Sophia's hand. She didn't look at the kidnappers. She looked at Marcus, a flash of gratitude in her eyes. She took Sophia to the main bathroom down the hall, one of the men following to stand outside the door. When they returned, Sophia, emboldened or simply oblivious, did not go straight back to the powder room. She stopped in front of Marcus's wheelchair. She stared at the bulky black vest with its nest of wires. "Broken?" she asked, pointing. Marcus looked down at her. Her eyes were huge, brown, and held no fear of him. "Yes," he said, his voice strangely gentle, "something is broken." She considered this, then held up her own toy. "Rabbit fixes." She offered the worn, stuffed animal to him. It was such a simple, irrational gesture, an offering from a world where broken things could be fixed with love and imagination. Marcus, the CEO who fired people for misplaced decimals, felt something crack behind his sternum. He didn't take the toy. He just said, "Thank you." The scarred man snorted, "Enough," back in the room. As Elena led Sophia away, Sophia turned and waved at Marcus, a small, open-palmed wave. He did not wave back, but he watched them go. And for the first time since the men had broken in, his fear was joined by something else, a fierce, protective anger. These men had brought a bomb into the presence of a child. They had locked a mother in a bathroom. They were not just criminals, they were a violation of a fundamental order. His mind, which had been calculating odds of survival, began to calculate something else, odds of their defeat. The hours crept by. The fake timer was reset again and again by the kidnappers, a psychological torture device. The real sun began to lighten the sky over the city. 9 a.m. approached. The plan was moving into its final phase. Marcus was given instructions. He was to go down in his private elevator, alone. The vest would not detonate unless it went out of range of the remote signal or unless they pressed the button. One man would be in the garage in the van. The other would remain in the penthouse with the remote, watching Elena and Sophia. If Marcus succeeded, he would return to the penthouse, they would remove the vest, and they would all leave. If he failed, or if police intervened, the man in the penthouse would detonate the bomb, killing everyone. "It's time," the scarred man said. He helped Marcus stand. The vest was heavy, a leaden weight of doom. "Remember, box 717, the van, you have 20 minutes. Marcus looked toward the locked powder room. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod to the door, hoping Elena was listening. Then he walked to his private elevator. The door opened. He stepped inside. As the door closed, he saw the scarred man take a seat, the black remote held loosely in his hand, staring at the bathroom door. The elevator descended. Marcus was alone with the bomb and the ticking clock in his head. He reached the executive garage level. The door opened. The black van was there, idling. The second kidnapper, a younger man with cold eyes, gestured for him to come. Marcus walked toward the bank's private vault entrance, a steel door set into the polished granite wall. His keycard and biometrics worked. The vault door, a massive cylinder of metal, was disengaged from its time lock. He entered the code he had given them, 7 Alpha 2 Niner Foxtrot 0. The inner gate clicked open. He walked into the cool, silent chamber lined with safety deposit boxes. He found number 717. He used his master key and the client's key, which the kidnappers had provided. The box slid out. It was heavier than he expected. He set it on the table and opened it. Inside was not cash, not bearer bonds, not diamonds. It was documents, thick-bound files, and on top a photograph. He picked it up. It showed a group of men at a hunting lodge. He recognized two of them, a now-deceased senator and a foreign general currently under sanctions. Standing with them, smiling, was the chairman of his own board of directors. Marcus's blood ran cold. This wasn't a robbery for wealth. It was a blackmail operation. They were stealing compromat. Incriminating evidence that could collapse governments and corporations. The bomb on his chest was to secure the silence of the one man who could legally access this box. He now understood the true stakes. This was bigger than him, bigger than Alina and Sofia. If he handed this over, the consequences would ripple out far beyond this garage. He had 20 minutes. He could follow orders, save his own life and theirs, and unleash something terrible, or he could try to stop it and likely die. Up in the penthouse, Alina heard the elevator leave. She was alone with the scarred man and Sofia. The man was packing, nervous now that the operation was in motion. Sofia was getting restless, hungry. "Mama, I want cereal." "Later, baby," Alina whispered. "No, now." Sofia's voice grew louder, a pre-tantrum whine. The kidnapper turned, irritated. "Shut her up." Alina tried to soothe her, but the confinement and fear had boiled over in the toddler. Sofia began to cry, loud, frustrated sobs. "Cereal, cereal." "I said shut her up," the man yelled, taking a step toward them. In that moment, Alina's fear for her child overrode her fear of the man. "She's hungry, she's 3 years old, what do you expect?" Her voice was sharp, maternal, and it gave the man pause. He glared, then stomped over to the kitchen area. He yanked open a cabinet, found a box of expensive granola, and threw it at Alina. "Here, feed her, be quiet." Alina caught the box. She poured some into Sofia's hand. The crying subsided into sniffles. As Sofia ate, sitting on the marble floor, she noticed something: the remote control. The man had set it down on the coffee table while he went to the kitchen. It was just sitting there, a small black plastic rectangle about 6 feet away from him as he stood with his back turned, looking out the window at the city. Sofia finished her granola. She stood up. She saw her rabbit, which had been dropped near the coffee table. She walked over to pick it up. The man didn't notice. He was watching the street below. Sofia picked up rabbit, then her eyes fell on the remote next to it. It looked like the TV remote at home. She reached for it. Alina saw what was happening. Her breath caught. "Sofia, no," she hissed. But it was too late. Sofia's small fingers closed around the black remote. She picked it up, and she pressed the big, red button on top. A loud, electronic beep sounded from the device. The scarred man spun around. His face went from confusion to utter horror in a nanosecond. He looked at the remote in the toddler's hand. He looked at the empty space on the table where it had been. He had not armed the dead man's switch. The press of the button would send the signal. Nothing happened. The beep was just a beep, a battery check, a sound. But the man didn't know that. For one terrifying, elongated second, he believed the toddler had just detonated the bomb vest in the garage, that his partner, the van, Marcus Thorne, and the evidence were now a fireball. His plan was in ruins. He screamed, a raw, guttural sound of rage and loss, and lunged towards Sofia. Alina moved faster. She threw herself between the man and her daughter, shoving Sofia behind her. The man collided with her, knocking them both to the floor. The remote skittered away. He was on top of her, his hands going for her throat. "You stupid woman, you've killed us all." Alina fought, scratching, kicking, but he was too strong. The world began to darken at the edges. Sofia was screaming, a high-pitched sound of pure terror. And in the garage, inside the vault, Marcus Thorne heard a different sound. A faint, distant alarm, not from the bomb, from the building's security system. A panic trigger. Someone had hit the button in the penthouse, the one behind the bookshelf. He didn't know who, he didn't know how, but the calculus of his 20-minute decision just changed. The silence was broken. The world was now coming in, and he was still chained to a bomb, holding a box of secrets that could start a war, with a 3-year-old and her mother fighting for their lives 47 stories above him. The scarred kidnapper's hands tightened around Elena's throat. Her vision tunneled, the sound of Sophia's screams fading into a distant roar. But the alarm he thought was an explosion was still blaring, a steady, piercing whine that was coming from inside the penthouse walls. It wasn't a bomb detonation. It was the panic room alarm. In her struggle, Elena's flailing hand had struck the concealed panel on the bookshelf, activating the silent distress signal linked directly to the building's security hub and, by protocol, to the city's counter-terrorism task force. The man realized his mistake a second too late. He released Elena, scrambling to his feet. "What did you do?" he snarled, but the question was for the universe, not for her. He grabbed the remote from the floor, his eyes darting to his phone. No message from his partner in the van. The plan was still live, but now it was contaminated. The entire building would be locking down. Police would be coming. His clean, professional extraction had just become a siege. Elena coughed, pulling Sophia into her arms, backing toward the corner. The man ignored them now, his focus shattered. He ran to the penthouse's main control panel, trying to access the security feeds, but the system was in lockdown. He was trapped. 47 floors up, with 2 hostages the police would now know about, and a partner waiting in a van for a package that might never arrive. He made a decision. He picked up his phone and called the man in the van. Down in the vault, Marcus heard the alarm and knew what it meant. The penthouse had been breached, not by more kidnappers, but by the system he'd paid millions to install. Help was coming, but help would see a man in a bomb vest holding a box of secrets. They would see a potential terrorist, not a victim. The rules of engagement for a bomb threat were brutal and simple: isolate, contain, and if necessary, eliminate the threat. He had minutes, maybe less, before a SWAT team breached the garage level and treated him as a hostile. The box of documents felt like it was burning his hands. He looked at the photograph again. His board chairman, Richard St. John, with a sanctioned foreign general and a dead senator. The dates on some of the documents went back 12 years. This wasn't just blackmail material. It was a chronicle of corruption, of illegal arms deals disguised as banking transactions, with Meridian Trust at the center. St. John had used the bank's most secure vault to hide the evidence of his own crimes. And now a criminal gang was trying to steal it. Were they working for a rival, a foreign power, or were they freelancers who had somehow discovered the motherlode? Marcus's phone, which had been useless, vibrated in his pocket. A single text from an unknown number: "Do not hand over the box. Your life is secondary. Destroy the contents. Instructions to follow." He stared at the screen. The message was not from the police. It was from someone who knew the operation was happening right now, someone who knew what was in the box, someone with the power to sacrifice him to keep the secret. The cold reality settled in his stomach. He was not just a pawn of the kidnappers. He was a disposable asset in a much larger, darker game. The bomb on his chest might kill him, but the people behind that text would certainly kill him, and Elena and Sophia, if those documents saw the light of day. He had to choose: obey the kidnappers, save his immediate life, and unleash the documents to God knows who, or obey the shadowy texter, try to destroy evidence he couldn't possibly destroy in time, and likely be shot by police or blown up as a bomber, or find a third option that didn't exist. Above in the penthouse, the scarred man was on the phone. "The plan is compromised. The building is hot. You need to leave. Now." The voice from the van crackled back. "I have no package. I leave empty. We get nothing. We need that box." "I don't care. It's over. The police will be here in 3 minutes. I have 2 civilians. I can use them to get out. You need to vanish." Elena heard this. Use them to get out. She knew what that meant. Human shields. She looked at Sophia, who was crying quietly into her shoulder. She looked at the floor-to-ceiling windows. There was no way out but the elevator, which was now surely locked down, or the front door, which would open onto a hallway full of police. They were in a gilded cage with a desperate man. The kidnapper ended the call and turned to her. His professional veneer was gone, replaced by the frantic energy of a cornered animal. "You, get up. You're coming with me." "Where?" Elena asked, her voice raspy. Out, we're going to walk out of here. You and the kid are my tickets. You behave, you live, you try anything, I put a bullet in her first. He pointed a gun at Sophia. Elena felt a surge of primal defiance. She stood, placing Sophia behind her legs. If you touch her, you will have to kill me, and then you will have no shield. You need us alive, so the gun is pointless. Put it away. The man stared at her, surprised by her sudden steel. She was right. A dead hostage was a liability. He lowered the gun slightly. Fine, but you will do exactly as I say. In the vault, Marcus made his decision. He could not destroy the documents, but he could not give them to the kidnappers. There was a third option: he could use them. He opened the box fully, pulling out a handful of the most damning pages. He took out his phone, ignoring the second, more urgent text now flashing from the unknown number, and began taking pictures, page after page. He photographed the hunting lodge photo. He photographed bank transfer records with obscured account numbers. He photographed memos referencing Project Greyfall. He uploaded them in real time to a secure, encrypted cloud drive only he could access. It was a digital dead man's switch. If he died, the files would be released to 3 major news outlets in 24 hours. He was no longer just trying to survive. He was building a weapon. As he took the last photo, he heard the distinct sound of heavy boots and shouted commands echoing down the garage corridor. The police had arrived. A voice boomed over a megaphone. "This is the police. The building is surrounded. Marcus Thorne, if you can hear us, come out with your hands visible. Do not make any sudden movements." He closed the box. He had to make them see he was not the threat. He had to make them see the real threat was 47 stories above him, with a mother and a child. He picked up the box, took a deep breath, and walked out of the vault into the garage, his hands in the air, the bomb vest clearly visible on his chest. A wall of red laser sights converged on his center mass. A dozen armed officers in tactical gear crouched behind their vehicles. "On your knees. Now, do it now." Marcus knelt slowly, placing the box on the ground in front of him. "I am not the bomber," he shouted, his voice echoing in the concrete space. "The device is remote detonated. The man with the remote is in my penthouse. He has 2 hostages, a woman and a 3-year-old child. You must secure that floor. He will kill them." The lead officer, a sergeant, kept his weapon trained. "Is the device live?" "Yes, but the trigger is upstairs. You assault the penthouse, he will detonate it. You need to negotiate." The sergeant spoke into his shoulder mic. "Command, we have visual on Thorne. He's wearing the device. He confirms remote detonation. Hostage situation confirmed in the penthouse. We need EOD and negotiators on scene now." Marcus felt a sliver of hope. They were listening, but then he saw the sergeant's eyes flick to the metal box on the ground. "What is in the container?" "Evidence," Marcus said, choosing his words with extreme care. "It is the reason for all of this. It must be secured. It cannot leave this garage." Before the sergeant could respond, Marcus's phone rang. The screen showed unknown. He looked at the officer. It could be him, the man upstairs. "Answer it, put it on speaker, slow." Marcus did. The scarred man's voice filled the tense air. "Mr. Thorne, I see the police have joined our party. This is unfortunate. Here is the new deal. You will bring the box to the penthouse. You will come alone in the elevator. The police will not interfere. If they do, I will kill the child first, then the mother. Do you understand?" The police sergeant shook his head violently, mouthing no. Marcus looked at the box of fire, then at the ring of guns pointed at him. He thought of Sophia's small hand offering him a stuffed rabbit. He thought of Elena's eyes in the dim light. He made another choice. "I understand," he said into the phone. "I am coming up." The sergeant started to protest, but Marcus gave him a look that silenced him. It was the look of a CEO who had just calculated the only viable move on the board. He was going back into the trap on his own terms. He ended the call and looked at the sergeant. "Give me the box. Let me go to the elevator. Have your EOD team ready. The moment I am in the penthouse, your priority is the hostages, not me, not the box, them." "You'll die," the sergeant said flatly. "Perhaps," Marcus said, "but not before I give you a chance to save them, and not before I make sure that box never leaves this building." He stood, picked up the heavy metal box, and walked toward his private elevator. The police parted for him, a surreal corridor of armed men allowing a walking bomb to pass. He entered the elevator. The door closed. He was alone again with the countdown, now heading back to where it all began. In the penthouse, the scarred man had dragged Alina and Sofia to stand by the front door. He held Alina in front of him, a gun to her head. Sofia clutched her mother's leg, sobbing. When he arrives, the man whispered into Alina's ear, "You will take the box from him. You will bring it to me. If you try to run, I shoot you. If the police storm, I shoot you. Your life depends on his obedience now." Alina said nothing. She was looking at the elevator indicator. The numbers were climbing. 40, 41, 42. Each floor was a heartbeat. She thought about the last thing she'd said to Sofia that morning, a rushed, "I love you," as she bundled her into the car. She thought it might be the last thing she ever said to her. The elevator chimed. The doors opened. Marcus Thorne stood there, the bomb vest on his chest, the metal box in his hands. His eyes met Alina's. He gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. Then he looked at the kidnapper. "I have it. Let them go." "The box first," the man said, his grip tightening on Alina. Marcus took a step forward, then stopped. "No, you wanted a transaction, a clean exchange, hostages for the goods. You get the box when they are in the elevator and the doors are closed." The kidnapper laughed, a nervous, ragged sound. "You are not in a position to negotiate." "I am the only one in a position to negotiate," Marcus said, his voice calm, commanding, the voice he used in boardrooms to end arguments. "The police have the garage, they have the building. Your partner has fled. You have one asset, the remote, in your hand. But if you kill them, you lose your shield. You kill me, you get nothing. The only way you walk out of here is with this box and with me as your new hostage. But you have to let them go first. That is the deal." The standoff stretched for 5 seconds, 10. The only sound was Sofia's quiet crying. The kidnapper's eyes darted between Marcus, the box, and the windows where police sniper dots were now undoubtedly painting his skull. He was out of time, out of options. He needed a way out. Marcus was offering a path, however narrow. "Fine," the man spat. He shoved Alina forward. "Get in the elevator, take the kid, go." Alina stumbled, grabbing Sofia. She didn't look back. She ran to the elevator, pulling Sofia inside. She turned, her eyes locking with Marcus's as the doors began to close. In that final glance, she saw not a billionaire CEO, but a man who had chosen to stay behind in hell so they could leave it. The doors shut. The elevator descended. Marcus was now alone with the kidnapper and the bomb. He held out the box. "Here it is, the reason for all this." The man snatched it, greed and relief flashing across his face. He opened the lid, saw the files, and nodded. "Good. Now we go to the roof. My extraction is still possible." But Marcus didn't move. "It's over. Your extraction was the van. The van is gone. The roof is swarming with police. There is no way out." "I have the remote," the man screamed, holding it up. "I have you. They will make a way." Marcus took another step closer. The digital timer on the vest read 0000. It had been at 0 for hours. A fake. The only real threat was the button in the man's hand. "Do you know what's in that box?" Marcus asked, his voice low. "Money, power, my retirement." "No," Marcus said. "It's a death sentence for you, for anyone who touches it. The people who want this don't leave witnesses. They sent you to do their dirty work, and they will dispose of you the moment you deliver it. The text I got downstairs, it was from them. It said to destroy the box, to kill me if necessary. You are not an asset to them. You are a loose end." The kidnapper's confidence wavered. He looked at the box, then at Marcus. The paranoid logic of the criminal mind began to twist. He had been hired through cutouts, paid half up front. He had never seen his employer. Could the CEO be right? In that moment of doubt, Marcus lunged, not for the gun, but for the remote. He grabbed the man's wrist, forcing his hand upward. They struggled, a clumsy dance of desperation. The gun went off, a deafening roar in the enclosed space, the bullet shattering a window. Cold morning air rushed in. Marcus used all his weight, driving the man back against the broken window. The kidnapper shouted, one hand clinging to the box, the other to the remote. For a split second, they were suspended in the frame 47 stories above the city. And then they fell, not out the window, but onto the floor, grappling for control of the one thing that could end it all. Down in the lobby, Elena and Sofia were rushed out by a team of SWAT officers, wrapped in blankets, ushered into an ambulance. Elena kept looking back at the building, at the shattered window on the top floor. She didn't see Marcus come out. On the penthouse floor, the struggle ended. Marcus Thorne lay on his back, breathing heavily. The kidnapper was unconscious beside him. The remote was in Marcus's hand. The box of documents was against the wall. Its contents spilled across the marble like toxic confetti. He had stopped the handover. He had saved the hostages. But as he heard the heavy thud of the police breaching the penthouse door, he knew the real battle was just beginning. The secrets were out of the box, and the people who wanted them buried were now coming for him. He still wore the bomb, a symbol of the trap he was in, a trap made not of wires, but of secrets, power, and the brutal truth that some stories, once started, cannot be contained. The penthouse door burst open. Police in full tactical gear flooded the room, their shouts layering over each other. "Don't move, hands where we can see them, EOD now." Marcus lay perfectly still, the remote held loosely in his outstretched hand. The kidnapper groaned beside him, coming to. In 60 seconds, the room was secured. The explosive ordnance disposal team moved in with careful, practiced precision. They examined the vest, confirmed the remote detonation system was still active, and then, with a series of clipped commands and specialized tools, they cut the vest from Marcus's body. The heavy weight lifted. He could breathe fully for the first time in 9 hours. He was helped to his feet, read his rights, and handcuffed. As they led him out, he saw the crime scene investigators already bagging the spilled documents. A federal agent in a dark suit separated a single page, read it, and looked up at Marcus with an expression of cold understanding. This was no longer a local police matter. It was federal. It was espionage. It was conspiracy. In the ambulance 2 blocks away, Elena held Sofia, both wrapped in foil blankets. A paramedic checked Sofia's vitals. The child was quiet now, clinging to her stuffed rabbit, her eyes wide. A detective sat across from them, asking gentle questions. Elena told her story in a flat, exhausted monotone. The clinic bill, the overnight shift, hearing the men, seeing the bomb, the locked bathroom, Sofia pressing the button. When she described Sofia offering her rabbit to the CEO, the detective stopped writing and just looked at the little girl for a long moment. Marcus was taken not to precinct, but to a federal holding facility. He was placed in an interrogation room. For 24 hours he spoke to no one. His lawyer, summoned by the authorities, was denied access. This was a black site protocol. On the morning of the second day, the door opened. 2 men entered. One was from the FBI. The other was from the Treasury Department's Office of Intelligence and Analysis. They placed a file on the table. It was not his file. It was a file on Richard St. John, the chairman of his board. "We've seen the photographs you took," the Treasury agent said without preamble. "The ones you uploaded to your cloud. You have just handed us a roadmap to a network we've been trying to penetrate for 5 years. St. John, the general, the late senator, Project Greyfall." Marcus said nothing. He waited. "The kidnappers were freelancers," the FBI agent continued, "hired through a shell corporation in Cyprus. The trail is deliberately muddy, but the intent was clear. Retrieve the blackmail file to protect St. John. He knew the audit was coming. He knew his vault might be opened. He needed those documents to disappear. Having you die in the process as a disgraced CEO-turned-bomber would have been a convenient bonus. So I was a loose end to be tied up twice over," Marcus said, his voice hoarse. "Essentially," the Treasury agent agreed, "but your dead man's switch changed the equation. The photos are out. We have them. St. John knows we have them. He resigned from the board an hour ago. He is currently cooperating with our investigation in exchange for certain considerations." Marcus felt a hollow victory. The man who had wanted him dead would likely serve little to no time. That was the way of the world he came from. Power negotiated. It rarely faced true consequence. "What happens to me?" Marcus asked. "You are a material witness, and you are also a victim of kidnapping and attempted murder. The state charges related to the bomb threat will be dropped. The federal investigation needs your full cooperation. In return, you will not be prosecuted for your peripheral awareness of certain activities at Meridian Trust. It was the deal he had expected, his freedom for his silence on what he might have suspected but never asked about. He would walk away, but his career, his reputation, were ashes. Meridian Trust was already being dismantled by regulators. His name was a punchline on news channels, the bomb vest CEO. The world he had built was gone. They released him that evening, no fanfare. He was given his personal effects, his wallet, his watch, the clothes he'd been wearing when it all started. He walked out of the federal building into a cool evening. He had nowhere to go. His penthouse was a crime scene. His assets were frozen pending review. He stood on the curb, a man who 48 hours earlier commanded a financial empire, now owning nothing but the suit on his back. A car pulled up, not a taxi, a modest sedan. The window rolled down. It was Elena. She looked at him, her face clean of the terror he'd seen, now just tired and solemn. "Get in," she said. He did, without question. She drove in silence for several blocks. Finally, she spoke. "Sophia asked about you. She asked if the broken thing was fixed." Marcus looked out the window. "What did you tell her?" "I told her you were working on it." She glanced at him. "They put us in a safe house, a hotel. It's fine, but I need to get back to work. I need my job." "The building is closed," Marcus said, "indefinitely." "I know." Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel. "The clinic called. They heard about what happened on the news. They said the debt is forgiven. A public relations gesture." She said the words with no joy. They arrived at a budget chain hotel on the city's outskirts. Elena led him to a room on the second floor. Inside, it was generic: 2 double beds, a table, a television on a stand. Sophia was sitting on the carpet, drawing with crayons on hotel stationery. She looked up when they entered. She saw Marcus, studied him for a second, and then went back to her drawing. Elena made coffee from a small machine. They sat at the table. "What will you do?" she asked. "I don't know," he admitted. It was the most honest thing he'd said in years. "I have to testify. There will be hearings after that. I don't know." She nodded. "I have to find a new job, a new apartment. We can't stay here forever." They sat in silence, 2 survivors of the same shipwreck, washed up on an unfamiliar shore with nothing. Sophia finished her drawing. She stood up, walked over to Marcus, and put the paper in front of him. It was 2 circles, one large, one small, with stick arms and legs, a green scribble at their feet. "You and me," she said, pointing, "in the garden." Marcus looked at the drawing. He remembered the stone bench, the plaque he had never seen her read. "There's no garden here, Sophia." She shrugged, as if that detail was irrelevant. "We can make one." The simplicity of it, the boundless logic of a child, broke something open in him. He had spent his life building fortresses of money and power, things that could be taken away in an instant. She was offering to build a garden, something that grew. He put his hand over his eyes. He did not cry, but his shoulders shook once quietly. A week later, Marcus's lawyer secured the release of some of his personal funds, enough to rent a small, furnished house with a walled backyard. It was not in his old neighborhood. It was in a quiet, unremarkable part of the city. He moved in with 2 suitcases. The first thing he did was not check the markets. He went to a nursery and bought 3 rose bushes, a stone bench, and a bag of soil. Elena, with her security detail still in place, came to visit, bringing Sophia. The little girl ran into the backyard and immediately started helping, or rather, directing where the roses should go. "Here and here, Rabbit likes this spot." Over the following weeks, a routine formed. Elena found a day job at a library. Her security detail was gradually withdrawn. In the afternoons after her shift, she would pick up Sophia from daycare, and they would often come to the house. Sophia would play in the garden while Marcus, working from a laptop at the patio table, navigated the endless depositions and legal requirements of his former life's collapse. He was a pariah in the business world, but he found he did not miss it. The silence he once curated in his penthouse was now filled with the sound of a child laughing, of Elena asking if he wanted more coffee, of the real wind in the leaves of the roses he had planted with his own hands. The federal investigation concluded. St. John received a suspended sentence and a massive fine. The headlines moved on, Marcus's testimony was given in a closed session. He walked out of the courthouse a free man, legally, and for the first time, perhaps personally. He used the remainder of his unfrozen assets to do two things. First, he established a trust for Sophia, for her education, her future. Second, he funded a legal defense nonprofit for undocumented workers and low-wage employees facing exploitation, and named it after Alina's mother. He did not put his name on it. He became a silent partner in his own redemption. One afternoon in early summer, the roses bloomed. Sophia, now 4, ran into the house to drag Marcus outside to see. The three of them stood in the small garden. The stone bench sat under a young maple tree. There was no plaque on it, not yet. Sophia picked one of the roses, careful of the thorns, and brought it to Marcus. "For you." He took it. "Thank you, Sophia." She beamed, then ran off to chase a butterfly. Alina stood beside him, her arms crossed, smiling softly. "You know," she said, "she thinks she fixed you with Rabbit that day in the penthouse." "Maybe she did," Marcus said. He wasn't talking about the bomb. Final surprise, the one that never made the news, came in a plain manila envelope delivered to Marcus's new house. It contained a single sheet of paper. It was a photocopy of a decades-old intake form from a city social services agency. It was for a 15-year-old girl named Alina Ruiz, seeking help after agging out of foster care. At the bottom, in the notes section, was a single line, referred to job training program, cleaning services. Bright, determined, wants to be a teacher. The form was signed by the caseworker. The signature was that of Claire Thorne, Marcus's late wife. He never showed it to Alina. He placed it in a drawer. But he understood then, in a way that defied all logic and reason, that the connections we make are not always accidents. Sometimes they are echoes of other kindnesses, other loves, returning to us in forms we could never predict. His wife, who had dedicated her life to helping lost children, had in a roundabout way sent a woman and her daughter to him when he was most lost. It was a story he would never tell, but would always know. In that small garden, with the roses blooming and a child's laughter on the air, the story that began with a bomb reached its quiet, real ending. Not with a spectacular explosion, but with the slow, steady growth of something new. Marcus Thorne was no longer a CEO. He was a man who had been saved by a janitor's 3-year-old, and in the process, had remembered how to live. The two parallel lines had not just met, they had intertwined, creating a pattern stronger than either could have made alone. And as the sun set, casting long shadows across their makeshift garden, the only countdown that mattered was the one to tomorrow, which they would face together. So how did a 3-year-old save a CEO chained to a bomb? She didn't disarm it with wires or codes. She disarmed the man wearing it. In a room where every adult saw a threat, a liability, or a target, Sophia saw a person who was sad. And in that simple, unarmored perception, she found the one vulnerability the kidnappers had overlooked: our shared, fragile humanity. This story is not about bombs or bank vaults. It is about the walls we build and the tiny, persistent hands that find their way through. Marcus Thorne built a fortress of money and isolation, believing it would make him safe. Elena Mendez built a life of silent endurance, believing it was the only way to survive. Both were trapped. And then a child, who knew nothing of fortresses, walked in and offered a stuffed rabbit. That is the real plot twist. The most powerful force in that penthouse was not the explosive, or the gun, or the secrets in the box. It was the innate, uncompromising empathy of a child who had not yet learned to look away from pain. We live in a world that teaches us to see barriers between rich and poor, powerful and powerless, safe and vulnerable. We are taught that these lines are real and that crossing them is impossible or forbidden. But every now and then, a story like this one whispers a different truth. It tells us that the most transformative connections happen not in spite of those barriers, but precisely because someone, often someone the world has taught us to ignore, refuses to acknowledge they exist. If this story moved something in you, if it reminded you of a moment when a small kindness dismantled a big wall, then this channel is your home. We don't chase the loudest headlines here. We listen for the quiet stories, the ones that happen in janitors' closets and silent penthouses and makeshift gardens. The ones about the bandage with cartoon stars, the drawing of 2 circles, the hand that reaches out when every rule says to pull back. These are the stories that change the world, one cracked open heart at a time. They are the antidote to the isolation we are all building around ourselves. If you believe in stories like this, hit subscribe. Leave a comment below telling us about a moment when someone's small act of courage or kindness changed your world. Share this video with someone who needs to be reminded that no one is ever too broken to be reached. We'll be here, waiting with the next story worth staying for. Thank you for watching.